Oklahoma's earthquakes are man-made. They're being triggered by the biggest and most important industry in the state, oil and gas production. But it's not from fracking, which is what most people think. Before 2009, there were on average 2 earthquakes a year in Oklahoma that were magnitude 3 or greater. Last year, there were 907. That's right, 907. The vast majority of earthquakes are small, causing little or no damage. But what they lack in punch, they make up in sheer volume. This tally from the U.S. Geological Survey shows the number of earthquakes in Oklahoma has increased every year since 2009, with more than 2,000 magnitude 3 and above. That means more of the bigger ones, like this 4.3 magnitude quake last December in Edmond, Oklahoma.
I woke up scared to death, praying that the house wouldn't fall down. I couldn't believe that the windows didn't shatter.
Melinda Olbert and Kathy Matthews are neighbors in Edmond.
What quake app do you use?
No.
They say they check their phone apps to track earthquakes around the state all day long. Look at that.
Cherokee, Enid, Fairview, Medford, Stillwater.
All in one day.
All in one
I can see why you
24-hour
would be
period.
bored already.
1 hour ago,
About
2
2
hours
minutes
ago,
of
4
science.
hours ago.
This must be unnerving.
I'm not bored.
It's no way to
We were
live.
talking.
It's no way to live.
Cornell University seismologist Katie Karanen was teaching in Oklahoma when the increase in quakes began. She says the situation is unprecedented. What's going on here in Oklahoma has never been seen before?
Just the number of earthquakes is astounding, but how fast it grew is perhaps even more astounding.
Karanen and her student, Catherine Lambert, have set up equipment to detect extremely small quakes in an area where there haven't been many, hoping the small quakes might provide warnings of larger ones.
And so far we've only looked at data from 4 days of recording. And so we see small earthquakes in the area.
Even over 4 days?
Even over 4 days we actually see many dozens of earthquakes.
Many dozens?
That's right.
Karanen was among the first scientists to link the earthquakes to oil and gas production. These are man-made earthquakes.
Most people feel that the majority of these are linked to this water being disposed.
The water that's causing the earthquakes is not from fracking, which is water and chemicals pumped underground to free up oil and gas. This is naturally occurring water that's been trapped below ground with the petroleum for millions of years. This is the oil being pumped out. Oil, gas, and water. Gary LaRue is president of Petro Warrior, a small independent oil company that operates 14 wells in Oklahoma. What happens in this cylinder is what happens on a grand scale at wells across the region. The oil, gas, and water naturally separate. So the bubbles...
This will be the salt water here, this is gas up here.
That's the gas, and
here's the oil.
The oil. Like every other operator in the region, big and small, LaRue's oil wells produce more water than petroleum. The gas and oil are collected in tanks for sale, but the water is too briny to be recycled or used. It's considered waste. All of this is salt water.
Salt water. So that has to go back in the ground. We have to get rid of it.
Getting rid of the water means sending it down a disposal well that's drilled deep below the freshwater aquifers to prevent their contamination and the zone where it came from. This is it?
This is it.
This is what all the talk's about.
Just a well in the ground.
LaRue's disposal well is one of more than 3,000 in Oklahoma. The state created a website to explain the earthquakes. This map shows disposal wells as blue dots. The orange dots are earthquakes. When the price of oil went over $100 a barrel in 2008, oil and gas production increased dramatically. So did the amount of wastewater and earthquakes. What's causing these earthquakes?
What we've learned in Oklahoma is that the earthquakes that are occurring in enormous numbers are the result of wastewater injection.
Mark Zobak is professor of geophysics at Stanford University. Zobak says there are 2 factors behind the earthquakes. One is the large volumes of water being disposed, and the other is where it all goes, deep down into a layer of earth called the Arbuckle. What makes this such a good place to dispose of all that water?
Well, it's very thick. It's porous, it's permeable, so it can accommodate, very large injection rates.
The only problem with the Arbuckle is that it sits directly on top of the crystalline basement, a rock layer riddled with earthquake faults.
So this water is seeping into the faults.
The water pressure is seeping into the faults, and the fault is clamped shut, and the water pressure sort of pushes the two sides of the fault apart and allows the slippage to occur today when it might not occur for thousands of years into the future.
Earthquakes are now a daily occurrence in Oklahoma, but it was 3 quakes in November 2011 near the town of Prague that caught everyone's attention. One was magnitude 5.6, the largest in Oklahoma's history.
Having an earthquake right now. Our light's shaking quite a bit here.
It toppled a spire at St. Gregory's University and severely damaged 14 houses, including the one where John and Jerry Loveland live with their 2 children.
Our bed was shaking, and all you could hear was glass.
Earthquake insurance is something that you don't ever think you're going to have.
Here.
In Oklahoma.
Especially in Oklahoma.
Like most Oklahomans, Lovelands didn't have earthquake insurance and have been doing their own repairs to save money. More than 4 years after the quake, Jerry Loveland often resorts to simply hiding the damage.
Doesn't that concern you? That you got a crack like this?
I'm afraid that if we went in and fixed these, and then there was another earthquake, even a little, it's going to crack it all, and then you've done all that work for no reason.
I'm not sure covering it is fixing.
It's not fixing it, but that's our only choice. It's not like we have the money to bulldoze the house down and start over. That'd be great, but it's not going to happen. We have a mortgage, we live on one income, and I realize that's our choice, but our choice is great when somebody else didn't screw our house up. And that's proven fact that somebody did it. It's not a natural disaster.
Oil and gas is Oklahoma's largest industry. You can see its importance to the state from the oil rig in front of the Capitol. In recent years, companies like Sandridge, Chesapeake, New Dominion, and Devon Energy have employed nearly 1 of 6 workers in Oklahoma. All the companies declined to provide someone to speak to us. For years, Governor Mary Fallin was skeptical the quakes were connected to oil and gas production. But as the number of quakes skyrocketed, she created an advisory council in 2014 to study the situation. Last summer, Fallin conceded a connection.
I think we all know now that there is a direct correlation between the increase of earthquakes that we've seen in Oklahoma with disposal wells.
Nonetheless, last year, the state cut the budget of the agencies investigating the quakes and regulating the oil and gas industry. Kim Hatfield of the Oklahoma Independent Petroleum Association sits on the governor's council. He did agree to an interview and insists the science is inconclusive.
You have to understand, the injection into the Arbuckle is not something that started in 2009, 2008, or even 2000. This is something that's been going on for 60, 70 years. And we've had a sudden change. And the question is, what changed?
The amount of wastewater injected into disposal wells last year is triple what it was in 2009, adding up to more than 200 billion gallons of water in 7 years.
The thing that's different is the amount of water that the oil industry is pumping into the Arbuckle Formation. That's what's different. And along with that difference comes these earthquakes. That's not the trigger?
The injection of water is a factor, but it is not possibly the only factor. We don't know.
So what more needs to be done?
We need to understand this issue. It's not as simple as saying, well, let's just stop injecting water. The energy industry is very important to the state.
If it's your house that's shaken, there is no way that we're moving fast enough.
Mike Teague is Oklahoma's Secretary of Energy and Environment. He's got the tough job of protecting Oklahoma's anxious citizens without damaging its most important industry.
I keep track of all earthquakes above a 3.0 in the state. And 2012, we had 3 dozen in the entire year. 2013, we had 109. Next year, we had 585. Last year, we had 907.
That's an alarming increase.
Absolutely.
So what have you concluded is the cause?
Well, the focus right now is disposal wells.
How do you balance out the economic benefit of the gas and oil industry and the public safety?
I don't think it's a balance. I think public safety has to take precedence.
Mark Zobak from Stanford has been working with Mike Teague and the State Earthquake Council for more than a year.
Lowering the total amount of saltwater injection into the Arbuckle is the only way that these earthquakes are going to start to subside.
Do they have time?
There's nothing we know that says larger earthquakes are imminent, but everything we know says that the earthquakes are going to be continuing, and there is a probability of larger earthquakes in the future if they do nothing.
This winter, the state called for widespread voluntary reductions in wastewater disposal by as much as 45% in earthquake zones. More than 600 wells are covered by the cutbacks. Last year, when neighboring Kansas had similar seismic activity, it reduced oil wastewater disposal and saw a 60% drop in quakes from the year before. But considering the huge volume of water already pumped underground in Oklahoma, it's too early to know whether the cuts here will succeed. Nowhere is the need for action more urgent than Cushing, Oklahoma. Cushing is home to the nation's largest crude oil storage and pipeline facilities, which the Department of Homeland Security calls critical infrastructure. The complex was rocked by a series of earthquakes last fall.
Now, the state has asked you to stop putting so much water down.
They did a voluntary action. We're 6 miles away from Cushing over there.
Independent oil man Gary LaRue says cutting back on the disposal of water also means cutting back on the production of oil and gas. With the recent drop in oil prices, the cutbacks, he says, will hurt.
$30 a barrel. If we have to cut our production in half because of restrictions they put on us, we're done.
You're out of business.
Yeah, we won't be drilling any wells. We won't be employing local people to do our service work. We're done. It will drive us out.
Just 2 weeks ago, LaRue abandoned one of his 14 wells to comply with the cutbacks.
You know that it's going to hurt the companies, it's going to hurt your friends, it's going to hurt your neighbors, but you cannot compromise when it comes to public safety.
We may be talking about trucking it 30 miles away. I think that could be done.
I won't be fear-mongered into thinking that you can't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because in my heart of hearts, I believe you can, and I believe you should, and I believe you haven't, and now you're paying the price.
We're paying the price.
Bill Whitaker has covered earthquakes around the world, but Oklahoma's are a different story. Go to 60minutesovertime.com, sponsored by Pfizer.